The two biggest smartphone releases this year, together in one frame. This is Huawei P30 Pro versus Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. And here's something that makes the whole thing a lot simpler. Both phones, at least here in the UK, are priced identically. For £899, you can have either with 128 gigs of expandable storage and 8 GB of RAM, making this the closest comparison we've ever done. And to get one thing out the way, they're both pretty similar feeling phones. The Huawei is a little bulkier, but both do a really good job of curving in a way that makes them feel comfortable to grip. They even share the same prismatic finish that reflects warmer colours, although I do like how the P30 Pro has the option for a gradient surface on top of that. The S10 looks a little plain sitting next to it, but some might prefer that. What I would say though, is that Huawei's power button placement makes a whole lot more sense. It is way easier to reach than, well, this on the S10 Plus, and it's ridged so that you can feel for it. Samsung's smaller camera bump is nice though. It not only means the phone fits a little better in your pocket, but also makes it more balanced when it's on a flat surface. You'll notice the Huawei has just that little bit of wobble. Also, Samsung has a headphone jack. It is nice to see that both devices are IP68 rated against water and dust, and that they both support fast wireless charging, as well as the ability to wirelessly reverse charge other devices. When it comes to displays though, the Galaxy S10 Plus is just so far ahead. They're both similarly sized OLED panels with an almost identical curvature on the sides, but whilst the P30 Pro has a respectable Full HD Plus resolution, the S10 Plus has roughly twice as many pixels on its screen. Not to mention Samsung's ability to display HDR10 Plus content. Having said that, I did try dialing up the brightness on both phones, and in that sense they are quite comparable. And then we've got the notches. Huawei has stuck to what they know, with this water drop notch in the middle, and it's okay. As far as notches go, it's about as unintrusive as it gets. But I do prefer Samsung's hole punch. Because it's got screen all the way around it, the interruption with this is a little easier to filter out when you're watching video or playing games. See, that brings us to security, because the only way that either of these companies have gotten away with cutouts so small is by removing any kind of advanced face unlocking. Samsung have ditched the iris scanner they used to have on past phones, and Huawei has skipped the 3D facial recognition we saw on last year's Mate 20 Pro, which is sad because it was really great. Anyways, that leaves us with fingerprint scanners as the recommended way to unlock both of these phones. And whilst this is the best fingerprint scanner Huawei has ever put on a smartphone, Samsung takes it. This time round, they're using an ultrasonic in-display scanner, and I made a whole video talking about this tech, but to cut a long story short, it's faster, requires less force to use, and is tougher to spoof. You can probably see that whilst the S10 Plus has dual front-facing cameras, the P30 Pro only has one, but Huawei has the resolution advantage, 32 megapixels versus 10 on the Samsung. Safe to say that neither of these is going to disappoint in terms of taking selfies, but they are for different kinds of users. That second sensor on the S10 Plus is a depth sensor, which allows it to get really realistic looking portrait mode shots with natural looking background blur. And you are going to lose a little bit of that realism when taking portrait selfies on the Huawei. But at the same time, you'll probably get a sharper result, so it's personal preference. Samsung does get one major win here though. It can record in 4K on the front camera, 4 times the resolution of Huawei. That is a very noticeable difference. Okay, this is the big one, rear cameras. And for sure, we can say already, both of these phones are industry leading, but there are some key differences. To start with, the P30 Pro has one camera that the S10 Plus doesn't, the time of flight sensor, and this basically gives the phone a better understanding of depth. In theory, this should mean better portrait mode shots from the rear camera, as well as the phone being able to better track objects in augmented reality. Then you've got zoom, and both phones have a telephoto camera that lets them get closer to subjects without any loss in quality, but there is zero doubt that Huawei wins this one. Compared to the S10 Plus and its standard 2x zoom, the P30 Pro can go 5 times, and it's really incredible. On the other hand, then you've got the ultra-wides, and to be clear, I love the fact that this is becoming a standard on flagship smartphones. Both are really capable at capturing an entire room in one frame, but I would side with the S10 on this one because it can go even wider. Now, that brings us to the main cameras on each phone, and I'm already working on an in-depth camera comparison, so if you could subscribe for that, that would be incredible. But there are a few things we can say already. Images from the Samsung phone will almost always look more natural. The P30 Pro, as with pretty much every Huawei phone before it, does quite a bit of processing and quite a bit of beautification. Mind you, that's not always a bad thing. Processing can help to bring out color, information, and most importantly, light. You see, with Samsung's omission of a proper night mode on the camera, the P30 Pro is a long way ahead with nighttime photos. This phone is basically built around getting as much light as possible into that sensor, and then processing it in a way that takes advantage of it. The S10 does have that variable aperture, which can open up to f1.5 in the dark, even wider than Huawei's f1.6, but Huawei's software for coping with that night is much better. The P30 Pro does have one kind of strange omission. It can't record 4K video at 60 frames per second, and considering that smartphones in 2017 were doing that, it's not ideal. Anyways, in my full review of the S10 Plus, I talked about how much I liked Samsung's new One UI software skin. Nothing has changed with that. I love how fluid and simple it is. And it's exciting because Huawei's P30 Pro is getting a bit of a software refresh of its own, but the differences are subtler. And whilst both phones are very fast, Samsung's software is now more inviting, and in my opinion, cleaner looking. They're both running Android 9 out the box, of course. I'm surprisingly excited to test the battery life out on the P30 Pro. For the last couple of years, Huawei's flagship battery life has been incredible, but we can already say for sure that these will both be comparable, but also close to industry leading. The P30 Pro slips ahead on paper with a slightly larger 4200 mAh cell, but it's a negligible difference. It is also the fastest charging phone by a much less disputable margin. The P30 Pro charges at a whole 40 watts compared to just 15 on the Samsung. I gotta say though, after that victory, Huawei then loses a few points when it comes to performance. You'll be hard pressed finding any slowdown in the UI, but the raw power of its Kirin 980 chip just isn't quite up there with any configuration of the S10. Both smartphones have advanced cooling for sustained performance over time, but just in terms of raw graphics and gaming capability, Galaxy is the way to go. Now, something that's often overlooked is that Samsung's Wi-Fi is also more capable. Whilst the P30 Pro has a pretty standard 802.11ac Wi-Fi chip, the S10 has up to 4 times more throughput with its 802.11ax system, and in that sense it's just a little bit more future-proofed. Now, for me, audio quality is really important. I watch a lot of videos on my phone, and I want the speaker to sound good out the box. Thankfully, the P30 Pro has a good speaker, but the way they've designed the earpiece to just kind of sit below the glass means that its volume can't keep parity with the main speaker, and so you're just getting a single speaker setup. And if you compare that to Samsung's dual speaker Dolby Atmos system, it's just not the same. Having said that, in theory, Huawei's new earpiece design should mean next to no sound leakage when you're on a call, so only you can hear what the other person is saying. Okay, this is a really close one, but taking everything into account, I would say the S10 Plus feels like the more balanced phone. It has a headphone jack, it has the GPU to play basically all games at a smooth frame rate, it has a future-proofed Wi-Fi module, not to mention a 5G version, which the Huawei doesn't. But then the P30 Pro has a few areas where it completely streaks ahead of almost every other smartphone. It is still close to market leading in terms of charging speed, and it's got a camera that can shoot nighttime photos like you've never seen before, as well as this crazy 5x zoom. So, which phone do you think won? If you enjoyed this video, it'd be massively appreciated if you could subscribe to the channel. And as always, my name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.